So, I suppose maybe we might start off, as I said in during the introduction, you're focused on the edtech space, but that's a very broad sort of definition, and it probably covers heaps of different things, and everyone has a different idea about that. Do you want to give us your definition of what edtech is? Just kind of set the scene.
Yeah, I mean, it's a new phrase that for I suppose an older industry anyway. So I mean, the education technology phrase has been used in the last number of years. We have fintech, medtech. So I think somebody thought, well, we call the industry edtech. Before that, it was e-learning, and if you go back even further, even in Irish history, there was a business, CBT Systems. Goes back to the late 80s, and it was in those days it was CBT. So
CBT,
computer-based training.
Wow.
So yeah, there's a few. I remember when I entered the industry, that was already the old. That was green text on a black screen. I thought that looks really old-fashioned stuff. We'll do multimedia and then e-learning. Now it's edtech. But I suppose as an industry, it means where is technology used to have some impact in education, learning, performance. So that can be kids using iPads to learn to read, write, or do their maths. It can be in the workforce, employees using it to collaborate better, to get support for whatever they're trying to do. It can be in schools, formal education right the way through university. So for us, it encompasses any one of those. So it actually is quite broad.
Do you consider content to be part of it then as well?
Yes, content is part of the industry.
Yeah.
It's harder to look for differentiated. If you're as an investor, we would sort of probably shy away a little bit from content, because it's not that content is a bad thing. Content's great, and it's great that there's lots of people now making really good content, but it is hard to differentiate content. It's hard to say, well, my content, whether again it's for maths or corporate learning, is so much better than yours. So we tend to look for, is there some innovative technology maybe behind the content? So it could be an engine that does 3D content better than somebody else's. We've invested in Story Toys, many of you may know, very successful Dublin-based business, and it does great 3D animated, storybooks, games for kids. But it's the 3D engine that sits behind the content that makes it kind of special.
Rather than what's delivered actually.
Yeah, so they still make great stories. They have to be really engaging, but they can produce stuff that's more engaging because of the technology they have behind their product. So look, it's anywhere that technology has to have a role in changing the way people learn. So that can be pretty broad when you go that way.
So when I was sending out some of the marketing messages about this, I did sort of say you've had over 2 decades, and I wanted to be sort of fuzzy about that, and I'm not trying to say he's really old and he's done a lot of things, but you definitely mentioned the word multimedia, and it's really transitioned away from that, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why, we like to think of, as you said, that even the sector we work in, EdTech, is part of like a digital technology industry that is, whether it's content or applications, it's delivered digitally, whether it be again to B2C or B2B, but nobody uses digital media anymore, let alone multimedia. Yeah. But that is what everybody's producing, is now interactive content, delivered to devices that you can, walk around with. Whereas the industry that we were involved in, which was doing CD-ROMs in the 90s, started getting excited about devices that you could walk around with, but they were literally huge, big devices with, if you remember DVDs, you could put into the player and the screen would pop up and the battery would run out just before the movie was finished, right? So like we hyped up the capabilities of, I suppose, everything that we did probably for close to 20 years, certainly 15. But in the last 5, I think that's where everything has changed there. The technology is there. And it's more a question of, can you find a really good application of that technology rather than does it work? Okay.
So you came from an engineering background first, so multimedia.
Yeah, video was really
was the first piece
I go
that
right
you
back.
started looking at.
Yeah, I mean, when I was in school, I started doing videos, just like Richie's doing here, and literally that was in school. And I wanted to work in film and video. That was what I decided I wanted to do. So as everyone does their J1, I said, well, I'm going to go to the States. All my mates were going to New York and working in bars. And I said, no, I want to go to California, because that's where the film industry is. So I wrote about 20 letters to Hollywood, received about 3 polite responses saying no, or come and see us when you get here. But one guy who was, again, a lecturer in college said, listen, you're in this video stuff, but you're studying electronic engineering, so you can do a bit of programming. there's a guy who used to lecture here who's now working in Apple. And I know he's working video compression, so why don't you drop him a note? And that again was one of those kind of serendipitous events. He said, wow, that's amazing, because our techies have been building all these compression technologies, but we haven't actually built a demonstrator yet.
Okay.
We need somebody who understands the video side, but who can actually probably play with our code a bit. So I was lucky enough to get an internship in Apple, and that was back in 1990. So Steve Jobs had just been kicked out, and the great white knight that was Pepsi's Mr. Scully was in there, but it was the very, very beginning of digital video. So it was tiny little small screen, but for me it brought the two things I was passionate about together. So there was the video stuff, and well, I was less passionate about programming, but I suppose I was equipped to do it. So it brought those two together, and that forced me in a direction that I've continued with right through.
What was your awareness of Apple, and as a young student in Trinity at the time?
Yeah, I was looking at so again, my dad had actually bought pretty early. I still have it at home. It's Mac SE, the one you pick up with a little small black and white screen. So I would have used them for college projects, and actually, because most people didn't have them, people would come to my house to do their college projects as well. But so I was pretty familiar with it, but obviously, even then it was still Cupertino. Like, and just every building is incredible, and Apple logos everywhere. But just the buzz around, it was a very widespread campus at the time. So I was only there for 4 months. It was a summer job, but that was kind of like, right, I know what I'm doing now for the rest of my life, kind of thing. So
really, so what was it about that experience then? Was it the coding, or was it the?
No, it wasn't.
It wasn't the coding.
Yeah,
right?
I mean,
so was it the opportunity to change something and to build?
It was still, for me, it was more about the creative stuff. It was more about the video. It was like, okay, these devices now are going to be able, because my project was to play a video, literally pull up a file, fast forward it, stop it, frame by frame, which obviously for most of you out there, that doesn't sound very innovative, but at the time it just wasn't possible. So I suppose that let me see what was coming. It did take quite a long time to actually get onto every desktop, but that still meant that this was the way media was going to be sent out there, was using digital. But I suppose I didn't know what that meant for me as a career, but it was, I still gone back and did my final year in college. But I was able to get, Apple provided me with a huge computer as it was at the time. It was literally about this size, to do my project, because it was the only device that would run the videos. So when I was in Trinity, this brand new, probably about 6,000 or 7,000 pounds worth of kit, and it was sitting there in the lab, in the electronic engineering lab. But if I walked in the room, whoever was using it had to get off and let me use it. So
do they still have it?
It's probably a doorstop somewhere or something. Yeah, it probably is in one of those museum pieces. But
so after the finals, then you obviously you'd gotten the product and the multimedia bug. You moved on then to Sony, right?
So yeah, I think that was another, again, I suppose when you think about luck, or where you intersect with where things that you've done and luck kind of fit together. So people from Sony arrived into us in college in 4th year and said, look, we're interested in people going to Tokyo to do an internship. So I kind of said, well, I've been to Apple, I'll go to Sony. And so that was another fun and interesting experience. The same kind of stuff. It was, again, they were looking at video. Obviously Sony at the time was probably much bigger than Apple would have been in video, but not really digital at that stage. So it was another great exposure to the industry. And between those two, I said, well, I now know what I'm going to do. I'm going to come back to Ireland and get a job doing this multimedia stuff. And I came back and I went around pretty much every big computer company, which at the time was people like Digital.
I was going to say,
yeah. And they kind of go, oh, that sounds really interesting, like the places you've worked. But we're not really ready for that yet, but you want to go and work in our sort of development team? I said, no, that's not for me. That's not. I've seen the future, and they're not ready for it yet. Like that line from Back to the Future, where I was like, your kids are going to love it. But I said, I feel enough about this that I'm going to give this a go. And people that we knew were in this little small company called Electric Paper. They were doing print design, again using Macs. And they'd started dabbling in this multimedia stuff. So I literally, my parents knew them. I arrived the front door of their house and said, can I come and hang out with you guys? So we literally got a Mac from Apple. We got the software, which was about $5,000 at the time, so it was a lot of money. But we got the distributor lend us a copy of the software. And I said, look, if you let me train up on the software, I'll do the training for you and the sales sort of support for you. So
just roll back before you start getting into the description of the role there. And like when you were looking around and you were talking to other companies and you're talking to digital and the likes of those companies, and nobody wanted to work on the stuff that you were talking about, did you at any stage say, I'm just going to do it myself? I'm going to...
Well, I think that was, so I went through, I did go through a period of I'll do it completely myself. And you started talking to, I knew somebody who worked in Levi's and things like that. Oh, you guys should be doing this stuff. And so I come up with the usual kind of
Levi's.
Just as in a brand,
right.
People I knew who were working in marketing, like, you guys should be doing this multimedia stuff to sell, to build. It probably was even, whether they were CD-ROMs or it was just on the computer, you should be doing all this stuff. So anybody I knew that was in sort of more of a marketing area, I'd go to them and say, listen, I'd love to start up this company, we're going to do these. And it was while thinking about that I met the other two people in Electric Paper.
And just going back onto the Apple and the Sony roles, you had been product focused at that stage. You hadn't done any customer facing activity or
no, they were both R&D labs. So both. I mean, and in fairness, literally why the guys in Ireland said this is too early for us is because they were both R&D labs. And if you walk into the R&D lab, say this building today, you'll find stuff that's not ready for market for another couple of years. So in hindsight, I now realise that I should have expected it would take about 5 years before anybody was going to use it or pay for it. But you're 22 years of age or whatever. It's like, look, why isn't everybody doing this now?
So then the role that you went into in Electric Paper, you were not quite employee one because they weren't quite.
Well, it was actually because they were husband and wife, and they weren't the usual kind of like I don't think they were even officially employees. They were just whatever money was left at the end of the month they probably spend. So I actually was officially the first time they actually registered as needing to employ somebody.
Did they pay you?
Was me. We managed to get again, for those of you out there who are sort of like trying to work out, do I have to go into this, the bigger job in the dull, boring company, or do I try it myself? It was 10,000 punts, of which 5,000 came from Enterprise Ireland under a Tech Start program, which was to help get technical employees into non-technical companies. And the distributor paid 2,500, and the two founders paid 2,500. Right. So that was a grand total of 10,000. But they were only paying 2,500. Yeah. So just about got paid. But at that stage in your life, you don't need much. Yeah.
What was the role then? What were they not quite paying you for?
So cause they were both creative. So it was a former architect and a designer, and it was like, well, this digital stuff, or multimedia as we were calling it at the time, requires programming, and they didn't have any technical background. So we kind of said, look, there's three of us. You're good at thinking about creative things, the architect. You're good at drawing them, which was the designer, and hey, you do video and you can program the stuff. So we basically, like any early stage business, said, right, well, we got to find the things that we can do ourselves because we can't afford to pay anybody. So let's do that and go out and find somebody who's willing to pay for those skills combined. So we did corporate product launches. We did touch screen things for banks and tourism sort of applications, things like that. Like if Fiat were launching a new car, we would do the slides that for them, and we'd have to literally be awake all night building the slides so they could do their car launch the next morning. Like nobody had PowerPoint, so we had to do the slides for all these guys. And it was in, they were very interactive. Obviously, it was loads of animations on it, but it was all kind of programmed. And
that doesn't strike me as being very close to what it was that you came back from Sony and Apple to do. With this dream of video and digital is going to change the world. Which is the
reality, I suppose. You once you decide we got to build a business, it's like, well, we got to find what people are going to pay for.
Yeah.
So the only people willing to pay for it was these bigger corporates. And that was probably one of the things that you then found frustrating, because you're in that, like, well, I can't raise money for this business yet, but I need to get some income. So you're doing the things, the necessary evils, and I suppose you're trying to then see where's the space going to be where we'll ultimately focus on. Yeah. And I think a lot of software companies end up in that place today, which is, we've got this great idea, and we're kind of building it on the side, but we need to get some money in, so we go and do whatever people are willing to pay for.
And think for a buck, right?
Yeah. And what actually happened then was, the EU and the European projects came in, which were looking for, will you use your same, at this stage now we were getting into a lot more of the animations and videos, so we were doing a lot more, I suppose, of what we were interested in.
Still the three?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, we had other people that we brought in. We didn't raise any money until about 1996.
Okay.
So that was 4 years later. So we did about 3 to 4 years of this sort of just, let's see what we can pull together. But then one of these projects was we got paid to produce a little small course on how to use the mouse. So again, those of you who are too young to remember, before the mouse, everybody was using the keyboard, and literally this thing arrived, and people thought it was a foot pedal and whatever else. So we produced this little tutorial on how to use the mouse, and it was literally like, you got to move the mouse up and down. If you did it wrong, it said, no, that's not right, you need to move it this way, and so it was very interactive. And then I went into how to open a window, close a window, move a window. I know it sounds really stupid, but
do you still have those? I mean, I
have CD-ROMs at home. If you ever want to learn how to use a mouse, so that project, kind of became this thing that we suddenly realized, what, these guys who pay us to do presentations, if it's a one-off gig, they literally throw it away the next morning. The car's launched.
Yeah.
Or it might stick around in a kiosk for a couple of months. There was no real long-term return for the customer who was paying for it. And then we found that with this training stuff, people were saying, that's brilliant. That thing you did for us last year, we use more because we've trained all these people. And we haven't had to, bring trainers in. The computer's done it. So we suddenly realized that this was probably, if you take all this technology, the one area that we feel there's a return for our customer is if we can do training.
Yeah.
And that was really what kicked off then the growth of the business as an e-learning business, I suppose. We found that as all these computers arrived, like Windows 95 obviously was launched in 95, so 95, 96, everybody was getting computers. So that was everybody in the workforce was getting these Windows machines and literally didn't know how to use them. Microsoft were pushing out Word and Windows, and then the internet came along as well. So there was this new thing, this browser and the internet itself. So we produced a series of CD-ROMs on understanding your PC, introduction to Word and Excel, and literally it was Netscape Navigator. So that was about 96, and that was then what we got investment. So we launched those products. We got our first, good paying customers across the different sectors, corporate and in vocational. FOSS would have been a customer of ours at the time. On the back of that, we raised the princely sum of 150,000 in a BES investment.
So just before we talk about the investment, that's what's interesting to understand during that 4-year period, how your own role changed, because you probably weren't doing much coding at that stage and doing the videos.
Yeah,
were you getting out more in front of customers?
Yeah, you're doing everything, right? So I suppose, like again, those of you who are involved in startups, you know the way it works, right? Like you should have an area of specialism, because if you've got a team of 3 people and they all do the same thing, that's not really going to work, right? So I was still the one who was pulling any of the stuff together. So okay. I was still doing that. Coding would be a loose description for it, because the tools available, there was scripting really, but it was a lot of the structuring of it. And as the things got bigger, there was quite a lot complex structures involved. And I was doing any of the animation, so any of the video, anything that involved media was still me. But then I was going to meet the customer. Again, you would be the ones who'd be up all night yourself, supporting it. If anything went wrong, particularly the technical stuff, it'd be my responsibility to fix it. So you're doing everything, which gives you a good sense of later as the business grows, what it's like for the person who's doing those things. So you're not going to go in and be impatient with the developer, because that's kind of hard. Yeah. Or when somebody's stressed out because they're dealing with a customer issue, you kind of remember what it was like when you did those things. So I think it's really important time. Focus on what you're good at, but also get an understanding of what everybody else is challenged with in their role as well.
What was it like working for a husband and wife team? I mean, how much input did you feel you had into their vision for the company? Did you feel like they were just going to kick you out the door at the end of the evening and talk about you for the whole night? Well, they probably wouldn't. Yeah,
it was probably in the early years it was a lot easier than, because what happened in about 97, 98 was we brought in a chairman about 96 actually when we did the fundraising. And after about a year, he decided that I should be the CEO instead of the husband.
You've been there 4 years and the chairman comes in and makes you CEO.
So it was all probably fine until then. So then all of a sudden, the husband and wife are talking about me whenever I leave.
Yeah.
I know. I mean, there's a few people here who were involved in different stages of that evolution. So it was not what I would recommend for somebody else, because it is difficult. And
did you find that you did have a vision for where you want? Because you had seen what was happening in the labs, and you had this idea about where you thought the industry was going to go.
Yeah, it's funny. I would say what we saw in the labs is the thing that's only happened in the last 5 years, actually. So, because what happened was, it was great, the video stuff. Like when we started in 92, 93, 94, you couldn't run video even on a high-powered Mac. So the video disappeared after the labs for a few years. And then Windows 95, literally, now you can get a machine that you switch on and video will run on it. And obviously Apple could have done it beforehand, but people weren't buying Apples in those days. So here was Windows 95, great video. And for about 2 years, we did huge projects with video. We did work with the airlines here, and you'd be out literally on the ramp in Dublin Airport and Munich Airport shooting 747s up close to train people on that you're not supposed to go this close to an aircraft. That was great. I mean, literally had animations of a body going into the engine and spewing out blood and everything, right? And that was so now I was in my element. This is perfect, right? But then obviously the web comes along, and you remember I have this presentation with the screeching sound of again, if any of you are old enough to remember, connecting to the web, whee, screeching noise. Is it going to connect? Is it going to connect? And then suddenly, yeah, I'm in, right? But you're in at whatever it was, 9,600 bits per second. Yeah. So video just disappeared, and it literally was, okay, all that funky stuff we've been doing, can we have a screen? Can we have a picture at the front? And then audio for 7 minutes? And I said, it's not quite as engaging as the video was. So the video disappeared until broadband internet came. Yeah. So that's why I would say, it's taken 20 years. It looked like we were getting there after 5, and then it disappeared for another 10.
It's interesting. It's interesting when the timing of something really, is impacted by the infrastructure and what else is happening on the device side as well.
And obviously the internet was huge for the connectivity piece. So what we were able to do was, now we were able to have, no matter where your staff were, anywhere in the world, they could connect, in real time, but not in digital, or not in digital media form. It would be, so you got the benefit of the communication and the, connection, but you lost all of the engagement.
So did you have to do the dreaded P word? Did you pivot at that stage when the internet came in and sort of disrupted video?
No, it was actually because, so the way it worked, and again, I wouldn't say we saw it coming, but we fell into this software training stuff, the way I described, and basically what that meant was we actually were building the simulations of those software packages.
Okay.
So that was still quite light in terms of bandwidth. So what that involved was literally taking Word or Excel or Netscape, taking screenshots of every screen that appeared, and then re-stitching them together in an interactive form. So if the learner is going, where do I click, and they click, then the next thing happened. And so we actually moved away from video, not because we saw it going away, but actually just because the applications we were building didn't need video. They were all software simulations. So all that happened for us when the internet came along was we had to make sure that our files were small enough to be delivered online. That was a lot easier to do than with video. Okay. So I wouldn't say we didn't pivot at all actually through that period, and it was probably lucky for us because, again, if those of you who are around will remember that in the early phase of the .com boom stuff, everybody was running around doing online stuff, and then when everything crashed, most of those businesses kind of disappeared, not overnight, but very quickly. But we hadn't gone up like this, so we just kept growing like this. So we literally went straight through the 01, 02 kind of crash, and we were still growing at that stage because we hadn't raised loads of money, we hadn't hyped the thing up, we just kept growing steadily.
So just go back then a couple of years and talk about that. So you're now CEO despite maybe some misgivings of the original founders, and you've got a chairman, and you've raised a bunch of cash for the time. 150 grand, right?
1,000.
Did you start looking around you at that stage and seeing who are competitors, and maybe you start thinking about building out a team and starting to drive scale?
Yeah, the key thing we did with first investment was it was all about the team. Yeah. So I mean, literally, you can imagine. I think at that stage, first 3 or 4 hires, there was 3 of us in the house to begin with. There was 7 by the time I said, look, we got to get out of this house. And again, those of you involved in startups probably know that feeling, right? It was like, look, we got to get out of the house. We got a little bit of money now, and we've always kept things really lean. So it was literally, there's a pretty grotty place in Donnybrook above the Balloon Man shop beside Kylie's, and we took a two-story sort of over-shop kind of premises, which was not very funky. It was pretty basic, but it worked because we went from 7 then to kind of 20 people, I think, in that space.
Okay.
Over about probably a year or 2 period. And most of that was driven now by sales, not by. So the investment we had got us to 7 people, maybe 10. Obviously, EI would have funded that as well. So the money we got from externally, we would have probably matched that with EI funding. So we probably raised a total about in euros about 400,000. So, but we got out and started selling. So we were selling even those 4 CD-ROMs I talked about. They went on sale in, I think, 1996 or 97, whatever it was. We just went out there and started selling it, you know. And as we sold more, we hired more people. And we pretty much knew the key, well, you know very quickly where your gaps are, because, you know, if you haven't got enough developers, you'll feel it. If you haven't got enough salespeople, you'll feel it. So you say, right, we need to hire somebody over here, but we can't afford it yet. Well, we've got to sell more. And then as soon as we can afford it, we hire that person. So it was very organic.
Was it local?
Yeah, we probably hired, I can't remember exactly when, around 2000, we probably hired our first person in the UK.
Okay.
So we were selling in the UK from here. So again, it was all Ryanair flights, and you know, but that was great. And I think you find if you're going into the UK, even today, you arrive in a meeting, whether it's in Newcastle or London or Bournemouth, whatever, and you say, "I've just come in from Dublin." They go, "Wow, I'm really impressed.
Yeah.
You've come all the way over to see me." Whereas it's quicker than if they got a train from London, you know. But they genuinely see that as being, you've made a real effort. So we would have flown in and out to begin with. And then once we started to see the scale, then we would have hired people in the UK, and ultimately in, I think Australia was next actually. So then it was like, you know, so wherever the markets are, get in there first, you know, probably remotely, and then once you know you've got your first few customers, you need somebody there, you hire local then.
I'm really interested in like how you decided, like what was driving that strategic decision making for you. You know, how much of that was opportunistic, serendipity? It was like you got a call from Australia and said we probably need an Australia office. You know?
Yeah, it's funny, and like all these things, you can turn the story around later and say that it was incredibly strategic. And I mean, I do remember, and again, the chairman was great at this, because I mean, to be honest, in my mid-20s anyway, you know, I was an engineering graduate. I didn't even know what strategy meant. You know, certainly what it really meant. Like I met somebody. You know, I think there's an opportunity with us. It was linked usually to. We were very closely linked to what was the European Computer Driving License (ECDL) qualification. So we built our products around that qualification, and as they went internationally, we kind of followed them. So that would be strategic in the sense that we said, right, we're linked to this, and then wherever they're going to go, we will go. We weren't just haphazardly moving around the globe. But did we sit there and have, you know, a grand strategic plan that says by, you know, 2001 we're going to be there and then? No, not really.
Did you consider yourselves to be a technology startup at that point? And if so, was there a community around you of other?
I'd say the first time and again, I think going back in time again, even the word startup actually wasn't really used that much. There was no startup ecosystem the same way as it is today. The Irish Software Association was kind of like, so we were a software company, but we were a bit odd as a software company as well, because there was all this creative stuff. There was more graphics and media in our products than there was, you know, lines of code. So we were kind of a bit odd that way. But we did get involved in software association stuff. Once we started to scale again, you got on the radar of, you know, the EY Entrepreneur of the Year program, the Deloitte Touche Fast 50 and those kind of things. So yeah, you become part of that technology sector, but it was nothing like it is today in terms of, you know, certainly early stage stuff. I don't remember any of these events actually, or anything even mildly like this stuff. It's quite jealous actually when you look at, you know. Oh no, there's a great energy now. I think it was harder then. It was. I'm not saying it's easy now, but it was difficult to find like-minded people that you could, you know, sit down and have a chat with and say, how are you getting on with this problem or that problem? You know?
So who would have been industry leading lights at the time that you would look at it and say, you I really like the way that they're, approaching their hiring, or the way that they're, talking about themselves overseas?
I don't know. I think in hindsight, again, if I look back, because Pat McDonough, who's not the Supermax guy, but the other one, right, who would have been the founder of Riverdeep, and before that he was the founder of CBT Systems, who ended up being the main financier of the business we basically sold to, that became a PLC. Like, he was already at that stage with CBT, and then I think they became Skillsoft. No, they became SmartForce. Actually, when everything went e-learning, so it was '99. So they were. He was around, and the only thing I could have gone to as an event was there was this thing called the CBT Association, and he would have been at that from the very early stage, and describing how, again, he just was like a dog with a bone when it came to sales, and was just literally like, I've got to go out there and wear the shoe leather out of my feet, selling this stuff until I find enough customers. And I think that for me was a realization for us, was that it's great to be enthusiastic and excited about your business, but when it comes to needing to scale it, you need to have other people who are used to doing that. And that was why so Alan Maguire, who's a partner now in Versari, would have joined the team again around that sort of turn of the century, because we realized, hey, listen, we're having great fun going out, doing the evangelistic sales piece, and it's, but that's probably at about €1 million. You've had great fun getting to 1 million, but how do I get from 1 to 10? We always see as being the next big challenge.
Okay.
And to do that, I think that's a different skill. That's a different type of management process.
We'll come back to that when we talk a little bit more about the Versari side of things. Maybe just round off the sort of the electric paper and third force story. Can we talk about the listing?
So basically we again, so this is where the husband and wife come back into it, right? So bear in mind that when I joined, he was 55 and said, I want to retire in the next 5 years, right? So now 10 years later, he's 65. And we started to build up. Now the business is over 10 million in turnover, 2 million profit. So we've got a really valuable business here. And it's about 2000, 2001, and Riverdeep floated on whatever day it was, and we said, okay, I think they had like 500,000 turnover or something at the time, and it was on the NASDAQ for 70 million, which is kind of like the equivalent of a unicorn today, probably, but it doesn't sound very big now. And we said we got to do something with this business now. It's big enough, right? It's got to be valuable. And obviously he was 65 and she was in her late 50s. Let's just sell this thing. And within about a few weeks, nearly, the market crashed. Again, you'll be familiar with that feeling. So we had to stick it out, right? So it took another 2 years nearly to actually sell the business in any shape or form. So in 2003, what we did was actually, technically, we reversed into a shell company. So what Pat McDonough had done was he put his own money into a technology business in the dot-com times. I hadn't worked, so he had a lot of money in that, and he was going to lose it all, and other investors' money. He said, no, I need to flip this into what I know best. So he created this e-learning business. He called it Third Force because it was his third e-learning business. And we became the first business within that PLC. So that meant all of a sudden I went from being, literally, okay, I was the CEO, but of a family business almost. Well, we had 100 people, but we were still felt like a family business, to being, and my colleagues were co-directors then of a PLC. Okay. So all of a sudden we have all the monthly, quarterly reporting of a PLC, but we're the same company. There's nobody else in that business. There was the CEO who came with the deal, and all of us.
What was the most surprising part of that?
Definitely, dealing with the analysts, and not that Brendan, the CEO, actually dealt with the analysts, but building a business. First of all, to sell the business became a really difficult thing, as Alan will tell you. Like, trying to hit your sales number when the two founders are saying, okay, the valuation of the business is all based on the sales number we've given this party who's looking to buy us. So we need to hit that number. It's way more important to hit that number than it was when it was just your own number.
Yeah.
And then when you become a PLC, it's what we've told the markets, we're going to do this number. So if we don't do the number, all shareholders are going to, potentially lose a lot of money. So we went from being literally a kind of somewhat carefree but enjoyable 12 million turnover business to being shit. We're now a really tiny PLC, because in PLC terms that's tiny. And we had all the crap that goes with that. the reporting, the legal costs. So to be honest, that's not where, like, when people talk about it'd be great if I could float the business, I'd say, well, just be careful what you wish for in terms of the sort of the crap that comes with that. It's not necessarily a good place to be.
Do you regret it?
I think in hindsight, because remember we're in 03 now, so we're in the depths of, certainly in a technology, we're in a technology recession now. Now, most of today's big companies were only starting at that point, right? So it took a few more years for things to pick up again. So we knew that was probably the best deal we could get at the time. The two founders, again, in fairness, at 65 years of age, they wanted to take as much as they could to retire on.
Yeah.
So it was a good deal for them. In hindsight, if there'd been things like MBOs that exist today, we would have been better, as in myself, Alan, and our CFO at the time, if we could have done something else and said, listen, you guys sail off and we'll... But there's no point looking back either, because it's like, if we'd done that, something else might have happened that would go horribly wrong. So, look, you can't really regret. I know everyone says that, but actually, genuinely, you wouldn't be able to do anything today if you were regretting, because you'd always be worrying then, oh, is this the right thing to do?
Yeah.
So
I think you have to just use back your own decisiveness, really.
Yeah, and look, let's see if we can do it, like do something again. I think that was evolved into the thinking around what we're doing now with Versari, is like when you do it in just the one business, you are betting everything on that. So all your time, all your energy goes into the one thing, and if that works like it did, that's great. But if it doesn't, then you're starting all over. So what we kind of said was we've learned an awful lot. Like literally, I'd gone from the front room to the markets. Others had come from bigger. Alan come from the Reuters and New York background, but we'd all gone through this experience of building up a business over 10 years. We said, well, it'd be great to do it again, but to spread that across a group of different people. So find some really innovative, exciting people who want to do their own business, but that we can help them.
Was that the driver to get you out of Third Force? Because you still spent a few years.
Post
float.
Yeah, I mean, like at that stage, I was definitely I was no longer super excited by software simulations and things like that. So I was keen to exit, but I was locked in for 2 years. So, firstly, in terms of shares, and then secondly, I literally had a 2 year. I had a 12-month notice period. So. So when I gave him my notice, I had to work for another 12 months. And I'll never forget when I was coming towards the end of it, and everyone said, look, they'll probably let you go 3 months early. And I was like, listen, will you work for July as well, which was an extra month? But we were acquiring other companies at that stage. So there was good reasons for that. It was like, look, the business is now acquiring. I think they acquired a couple more companies. We got a big deal. We can't make it look like you're leaving. Yeah. So you go, look, I'm a shareholder. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So I'll stick around for another month. But yeah, it was good to get out. I mean, at that stage, that's 12 years, is it? No, it's 14 years. Yeah. So everyone thinks these things happen overnight. That was a long time. That was long enough for me.
Yeah.
It was 2006. Like, okay, the world has picked up a little bit from 2003. There's other things that I'd like to do. I had two small kids at the time as well, so it would be nice to have a little bit more time. But at the same time, I want to start thinking about what we do next, and what's next. And that was really where the Versari idea came from. So I mean, Alan and myself, we joke about it. We were coming back from a Deloitte Fast 50 event in Belfast, and again, I think we've done well. We come like top 10, whatever it was, fastest growing tech companies. So we're like, okay, that was all great fun. But what do we do next? And we said, look, let's see if we can, Alan was locked in for longer, so it was like I was going. So listen, you stay where you are. You do all the hard work, and I'll go off and spend a bit of time with my kids. But at the same time, let's see if we can find a model that will enable us to help new companies to learn from our experience, but to work with them, so to get stuck in. We'd had non-executive directors, particularly when the business was bigger. You have these guys coming in, and on paper they sound like they're brilliant, and you go, okay, that'd be brilliant. We'll have this non-exec. And they are good. They give you their Rolodex, and they say, listen, go and speak to my friend, but they're not getting into the business.
Yeah.
And we said, what we want to do is have a way to really get embedded in the businesses that we work with, because the problems they're going to have are going to be largely similar to the ones we've had.
Yeah.
It's going to be about finding the right people. It's going to be building a team and making that team gel, and all the shit that you're going to have to deal with is going to be the same kind of problems, like the product is broken and the customer's on the phone saying, what do we do now? To the release dates of, you've not been able to hit your release dates, but you've promised it to customers. it's all the same kind of things. It's all the same kind of problems. So
you were looking to, get I suppose, de-risk it in terms of not being stuck into one single company, but also being more involved in the non-exec.
Exactly. So it was like, and you have to get the balance right, because obviously if you say, well, let's work with 10 companies, then you're going to end up being that same little light touch.
Yeah.
So we kind of thought about, well, and look, it's evolved, to be honest. So it wasn't like driving back, because we were pretty hungover driving back from Belfast. I don't think we came up with it all strategically, on the way home, but it was like, I was able to get out there and start doing some consulting gigs. Alan joined me a couple of years later, and we were still doing consulting gigs, but it was like, but with consulting, they say, look, we want you to come in and help us with our sales or our product, whatever it is. You go in, and particularly when Enterprise Ireland of supporting them, they say, look, it's 20 days, and you go in a 3-month period, and you say, I realize everything that's wrong with your business. All you got to do is these 4 things here, and we'll work with you, but you should be better. I'm not saying you'll have it sorted. And then you walk away, you get your check, and you say, great, that was great, we cracked that business. And then you go back, you meet them 6 months later, how are you getting on with, we didn't bother doing that, we just did that for Enterprise Ireland. And we kind of realized, that's no disrespect to the people that we worked with, but it was like, unless we can get into the business and really help them to see what they need to do differently, it's very frustrating. So we didn't want to be consultants. We said, look, what we need to do is have a model whereby we do the consultancy thing first, but then we stay with them. So in other words, we go in, help them find out where their weaknesses are. And we look at this as like, if you take a kind of, think about, we're going to have pizza later, right? So you take the pizza, you probably have product, commercial, finance, and people, the 4 main quadrants. You split those all up and you look at them and say, right, you got really good product people, but you're weak here on the sales side, so we can plug that gap. But you also need a bit of help on the finance, we can plug that gap. And we've spoken to your people, they do not know what you're doing as a business, so you need some work on alignment. Yeah. So we'll go back to them with a solution that says, we're going to plug in these different elements, and we're going to stick with you, and we're going to work with you, and something else will come up in 6 months. But we're always going to be there, kind of as part of the team. It's like a virtual team.
Yeah. So just before you get too deep into the Versari model and how you've grown that so far, at any point, say post 2006, when you and Alan were working on it, not quite a strategy, but trying to figure it out, did you consider looking outside of EdTech? When you were looking at it?
It's a great question actually, and we definitely did, and we've gone through that sort of thought process a few times. So we started saying, well, we could do this across all digital, right? Sure. So I was not going to go and do it in bio or pharma or something, but anything to do with building digital software products, selling digital software products, particularly B2B. So I think we were pretty comfortable that, look, there's great people out there for doing B2C, consumer internet stuff. That's not what we do. We are good at selling to somebody who's going to write a check. So the thing for us is always, who's going to write the check? So even if it's a parent paying $3.99 for an app, they're still paying for your software product. So we reckon B2B digital businesses, we can do all this. And as we went out there, we realized we ended up again sounding like consultants, because we didn't know enough people in those spaces. Whereas whenever it came to something that was in e-learning, as it was still then, it was like, oh, that's great, we know somebody, we can talk to a person who can help you sell that, we can talk to somebody who can help you build that. It just became easier for us to do, but also it made more sense that if somebody said, who should we talk to if we're looking at doing an EdTech product, there was a reasonable chance they might think of us. Having said that, we still have, I still spend most of my time working in CustomerMinds, which is a digital marketing business, and we have 2 or 3 other businesses in our network that are not in EdTech, but they're still involving web technologies, again B2B, and we're still pretty comfortable working outside the pure niche space. But again, Versari actually means focus. It's a Latin for focus. So we kind of go, look, we can be focused on EdTech, but it doesn't mean we don't do a few things, on the sides. But we're not going to be just, trying to be all things to all people.
Yeah, wide and shallow. So talk about the point at which then the sort of this emerging Versari model of supporting and staying with the companies turned into let's also think about investment needs and capital needs.
So I think, early in the sort of the thinking, we realized, okay, to be honest, and we know entrepreneurs, and we've been in there ourselves, it's great to go in and say, look, here's what we think you should do with your business, but it's going to need money. And well, guess what, I don't have any of that. So we realized that, okay, that one of the first things they're going to need to help them is capital. So we said, right, well, we need to have our expertise, but we need the capital piece as well. So, and again, probably was serendipitous, but it was based on work we'd done before. I got a call. I'd worked on a project for Folan's, the book publisher, and that had been a couple of years prior doing the consultancy stuff. And they said, look, we're looking to set up we're looking to invest in digital businesses, but we've realised, because we've made a few direct investments, that we don't know the business side, we don't know the product side. So what we really need is we'll provide the funds, but we need 2 industry people, one of whom is product based and one of whom is commercial. And I can say, well, guess what? That's what we have, and what we don't have is the fund.
Yeah.
So again, it was fortuitous, but based on hard work prior to that, and that was really how that came about. That Leaf Investments was funded by Folan's, but we effectively, along with a third partner, Hugh O'Driscoll, identified the companies that we're going to invest in, and then again stick with them through that investment and the ongoing process.
They're very different skill sets, though. They're managing a fund and doing the selection process, the triaging, the rejections, the sourcing for investing in early stage startups is entirely different than coming in and saying you need an alignment between your sales and your product.
Yeah, I think, and we learned
You're
probably.
not daunted by that?
Well, again, I suppose you get the sort of, the sort of startup mentality. You only realise that afterwards, right? So, again, I think part of it was because of the different approaches of the 3 people involved in this case. Hugh O'Driscoll, who was the third partner, was from a corporate finance background, so he had experience of investing. Obviously, Alan and myself are pretty good at analysing, commercial or product or technology opportunities. So what we were able to do whenever we were analysing the companies, we split it between the 3 of us. So we'd go, okay, well, I'll take a look at the product, you take a look at the market, and you take a look at the numbers. And then it actually does come down to, it's not that different. Like we're analysing, we're asking all the right questions. And some of it does come down to gut feeling. You know this, right? Because you do the same thing. It's like the team is a key part of it, right? So we talk to people. Do we think this person's going to be able to make a success of this? Do I think the product actually, stacks up? Does it look like it actually could meet the demands that they think they've identified for the market? And does Alan think that they've got the right people or the right opportunity to find the right people to sell that?
So, and you don't need to go into numbers now, because I know there's sort of like commercial sensitivities there, but this is sort of like what, 2009 or something?
We're about 4 years now, but no, it was later than that. So we started with our model around 09, 10 properly.
Okay, and then
but Folan's
came
in about 2012.
Okay, so I mean, at that stage, I'm never going to say there was a lot of funding available, but you had the seed funds who were in operation. You had some of the VCs were sort of starting to kick in as well. How did you and Folan's say, we're going to look at this sort of space in terms of the spectrum? It's not going to be super early, it's not going to be pre-seed 50K, it's not going to be late stage 5-10 million.
Yeah.
What was that process like?
Again, a little bit evolutionary. So when we started, we definitely, and I was probably a big, I liked the idea of putting some of the funds to work in smaller. So then Competitive Start came along, and it kind of more or less wiped out, because we weren't going to be able to do terms that were similar. But it was that kind of idea, let's put 50K in here and see how it goes. We did one kind of investment, but like that, it was about 75. But pretty quickly we realised that that for our investors, that was a little bit too early. So we kind of set a benchmark of about 100K revenue. So in other words, that means, and I always talk about 0 to 100 is your first big challenge as a startup, right? So you got nothing, you got to build something that somebody's going to pay for, and if you get enough people to get you to 100 grand, you know what, you've probably proven something, right? So we thought you have to have something like 100 grand of revenues, and we're gonna invest to get you to the next stage, which is from 100 to 1 million.
Okay.
And so it was the probably typically 250 out of a 500K round with EI probably coming in was where we saw ourselves. So it was seed fund. It was in the seed fund space, really. Yeah.
That's a very top-down approach, though, isn't it? Sort of like, where can we have the impact? Did you look at what the stock was in terms of, no pun intended, but did you look at what was emerging from the community in terms of actual viable projects and go, you know, there isn't enough here to do
No,
the 510 or...
I'd say what we probably did is when we started, because I remember actually Hugh, our colleague, saying he didn't believe in it at all, actually. And it's been funny that literally in the 4 years, so then again, the phrase EdTech, if you go back to 2014, search in Google, you won't find EdTech. You certainly won't find any investment in a thing called EdTech. And literally since then it's gone to 600, 1.2, you know, 3 billion plus investment, driven by the US big VC fund. So, you know, again, did we see that coming and say strategically? No, but it has emerged that way. So it is a hot space now, and there's lots of stuff out there. Lots of people, really good ideas, but you can very quickly say, but how many of them got to 100K? Right. So of all the things that are out there, there's a lot of really good stuff, or potentially good stuff going on, which is why the 100K barrier for us is great, because it's like, you know what, if you haven't got to there, for us, you haven't proven, you know, the value of what you're building. Whereas if you get to there, first of all, there's less of you, but it's much easier then to get into it and say, okay, so the customers you've got, can we talk to them? You know, the roadmap that you have, does it meet what those customers are saying are the pains that they have, you know? So it does make it easier than being at that very, I know this is an NDRC, you are at that very early stage. Sure. And then it's nearly all about the team. From like, it'd be do I believe this guy, even if he has to pivot 3 times, is going to make a good business? Yeah. Whereas we're a little bit beyond that. And we didn't have the funds to do big rounds. So, you know, I think at the moment that we've a number of investments that are over $1 million now, in terms of, you know, that we've put over $1 million over a period of time into a number of those companies. But most of them are still in the, you know, sort of 500, 600K, and that's kind of the space that we still see that we can invest in businesses at that level and see how they get on. And if they go beyond that, then that's great for everybody. But we're probably not going to be able to follow into be part of a Series A kind of round.
So you've made, say, 10, 11 investments that the fund at this stage. And the model is very unusual, right? I don't know if it's entirely unique, but it's very unusual in that you provide the services, you've got the hub. In terms of time, how do you manage that out for yourself? Like, how much of your time is meeting new startups in terms of the sourcing, making an investment decision, doing the work in terms of the services for the fund ones, the CustomerMinds, reporting to Folens? How many of you are there? You know, when did you kill yourself? I think.
Yeah, my son's only 12, so I need to get him to grow up very quickly. No, I think, look, that's the challenge when you are spinning those different plates.
Which bit of it do you dislike the most?
I don't know, actually. Yeah, no, I genuinely, I still get a kick out of most of it, because, like, even when things go wrong, I'm kind of, okay, that's here's an opportunity for me to help people fix it, you know. And then when you fix it, you go, whew, thank goodness we got through that one, you know. Because you can't avoid those things, right? Nothing is ever going to be perfect. So I think balancing the time is tricky, and again, it comes back to probably finding people that you can work with, that you know and trust, that you share it between you. So particularly within the sort of the Versari world, so Leaf is the fund, right? So that helps. I mean, I have 5 different email addresses that are all kind of official work email addresses. So in my inbox, which one am I going into? But at least I say, okay, but if it's a Leaf thing, then I only do a certain amount of things. I know what to pass on to Alan, or I know what to pass on to Hugh. In Versari, again, it's probably a lot of the time running the hub, which we now have in Mount Street, will be guys who are here. Amy, who's very involved in this, Shauna and Belinda, they'll be doing a lot of the day-to-day work around the hub itself and working with the customer, our customers, as in with the companies. And then Alan will be working in terms of leading that process and getting very involved in some of the companies, and I'll be very involved in other businesses. So right now, I'm probably spending 80% of my time within CustomerMinds. Okay. But that's something that moves, like, because we move into the companies, we work with them, you know, for a period of time, and our goal is always that we're successful if we let those companies basically grow on their own. So the whole Versari model is, we're going to come in, we're going to help you, again, get from 0 to 100, 100 to 1 million, and then in the 1 million to 10 million, we're really helping you to grow that team. So success for us will be when they're saying, listen, we actually don't need you to come and chair this sales meeting next week, because you've helped us to hire a really good sales director who's doing that for us now. And helping those businesses go on that journey from 1 to 10 means we will be backing away, like with the hub, a couple of the businesses are thinking about, well, maybe it's time for us to get our own place. And it's like, okay, great, move on out. It's like parents saying, you're ready now to leave. But we're delighted because we've helped you to grow into a mature company that now needs its own space. So
I'm conscious of time, but one of those 5 email addresses is possibly Learnovate, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So alongside all that other stuff, you do support the sector itself. Like, you are interested in the edtech industry, both from a sort of purely commercial, looking at it from the investment side and the growth, but also what's developing there. Why do you do that? What
because it is going back to the labs, right? That's still the engineer in me, I suppose, that's interested in what's going to come down the line. Now pretty much shorter time frames, hopefully. So 18 months, 2 years out. So the stuff that's been worked on now is things like machine learning, things like virtual worlds, things like APIs and web services. So again, those are technologies that again, I would see being relevant in all the businesses we work with, whether they're in education or other digital businesses. But it's like, by being involved in Learnovate, there's like 20, 30 researchers across 3 or 4 universities who are looking at that exciting technology stuff. And I get to drop in and out every now and then and see these technologies being developed, demonstrators created, that shows how those technologies could be used in a product, which might be still a couple of years away. So you get a kick out of that.
Yeah.
You get a view on potential businesses. So this, spin out businesses from Learnovate. The ability to understand where you think the market is going, better informed by somebody comes, I've got a great XYZ technology. I can go, well, that's not as great as the one I've seen, closer to home.
Yeah.
And then the other key thing is, particularly for the sector, the edtech sector, is it becomes a focal point for the sector, not just in Ireland, but actually internationally. So for us, it's literally 5 minutes down the road, and I can literally move. We've had somebody over this week from the US who's been literally between Learnovate and our hub. He's met about 5 or 6 different companies within the space, most of whom were ones that we work with or invested in. He did virtual calls with one of them who's based in the UK, but it was all done out of the square mile around our business in Learnovate.
So you've been involved in the community for 20 years. You didn't want to say too loudly.
I've already told him it was 92, didn't I? So.
Yeah, so it's even more. Right? And you're very involved, obviously, from along many parts of that spectrum in the community. What have you noticed has worked well since having nothing at all there when you were starting out with electric paper? What's good about that community now?
I think So I think we talked about earlier.
Jealous,
I think it is. Like I laugh when you read these things about like MBAs, deciding that instead of going to work for McKinsey, they're going to do a startup.
Yeah.
Right. So it's become this,
Do you laugh because
4th level education almost? No, I just think that would have been so crazy if they said they were going to do that. They went to McKinsey's, they went to Accenture, they went to, those kind of firms. So I think, look, the ecosystem is great, and I think it's great what all the sponsors, whether it be Google, the Bank of Ireland, yourselves, it's exciting, right? And we talk about the buzz and excitement of the startup. We try and not temper that, but eventually help people to develop that into a scalable business. But geez, it's great fun to even be just messing around in the startup level if you haven't quite worked out what you want to do. The other big difference is the technology is so much easier to build stuff with. And I think that I remember going to an event, probably still now 5 years ago, so I'm sure the numbers have come down, but what cost $1 million to build in the .com time costs 100,000 to build today.
Yeah.
So you're basically a tenth of the capital required. Now I would still say, tools-wise that might be true. So in other words, you can get the tools to build stuff really quick, but that doesn't take away the need for good product design and good engineers. And so like the tools are available, and you can hack stuff together and throw stuff together. But actually to find a great market build a great product that really fits the needs of the that market, that's still hard. That's still people. That no tool will do that for you. So
Probably still costs as much to hire a good salesperson to understand their
yeah, I don't think that's changed, definitely, and there's no difference there. Like, I think Ireland, Europe even, is still few and far between. There's great, Qualtrics, the guys from Qualtrics. The reason why Qualtrics find it really easy to get salespeople is because they're based in the Mormon state of Utah, whatever it is, and everybody, all the young people, have to go out and go door to door, trying to sell the religion. So they make great salespeople, and unfortunately we don't have the same situation
not
here. So
not sitting here, not because I've had a beer. Just to go back to the question though on sort of the ecosystem and the support, and you're kind of saying there's a huge amount of stuff that's great fun and you can kind of dabble, I guess, in there. At what point does it become a distraction? And how do you, as an investor, look at somebody and say, you're doing this because it's fun? You're an entrepreneur. I hate that phrase, but it's there.
I think it's really important to have fun, by the way. I think in those early days, if you're not having fun, actually you're probably doing something wrong as well, because you should be having fun, but being able to find, again, it comes back to, for us, because it's typically going to be B2B, find somebody who's going to pay for this great product that you're building, and then have fun doing that and have fun selling that, then you're okay. Whereas if you're just having fun because you think you've built something fantastic, but nobody else thinks that, then you're probably going to be doing this a few times. And that's, you've seen this with, so you go through Wayra, then you go to NDRC, and then you go, it's like, okay, that for me wouldn't be a good sign, right? Yeah. Unless I can see that, well, I did Wayra and then I learned this, and I went to NDRC and then I learned that, and now I've really got locked in on this. I'm still having great fun, but I've got a customer, I've got customers who are at least engaging with me, ideally are paying me for what I'm building, and I've got a really good bunch of people that I'm having fun with, and we've got the people we need to build this thing.
I think that's a good point to maybe hand it over to the audience. So we've got loads of time for Q&A. Anybody wants to shout out the first question? Or you all just want to go and drink beer?
Yeah. I'm just wondering, do you have any advice for a non-profit start?
Yeah, good question. Tell me a little bit more. Like what kind? Like in what area? What's the?
So education, kind of more services. So working with creative technology within the kind of formal education and the informal education sector. So like kind of educate together schools.
Okay.
Institutions and that.
Okay. So again, I suppose it's probably then. You still need to find somebody who's going to be. You still need resources. So you're still going to want to say, well, I'm going to build a product that somebody's going to use, but somebody's got to fund that. So that could be funding related. So again, a big thing that we were able to do was, particularly in the UK, find out where the funding was for the products that we were building. Now, the funding won't be for your product, but it'll be for the qualification or the area that you're. So let's say it was autism or something. You find, well, I'm going to find funding that's available for that particular special need, because that's what I want to build my product to address. And then don't be shy about, I'm going to say, milking that. Like, that's what the funding is there for, right? And if you've got a better way of using those funds to treat, or not treat, to work with somebody with and it doesn't need to be for a disability, but to use that example, that's better use of those funds. So, if you can find that source of, again, it comes back to the problem. So what if your product is going to be better at teaching somebody, and there's funds available to teach more of those people, get somebody who's like, call them business development, don't maybe call them sales, but you still got to find that funding. And we did really well out of, again, it was a long time ago, but it was a huge part of the UK was things like basic skills. And they said people need to be, if they're going into the workforce, they need to be able to read, write, but they also need to be able to use computers. So we had products about computers. So we harnessed that funding landscape. And we literally had a person whose job was to find out what do we need to do to get the funding, but also what do our customers need to do. So if you're dealing with schools, how does a school get the funding to pay for my product? Or do I have to deal centrally with local enterprise or local education authority or whatever it is? Who has the money and how do I use that to fund my business? So I still think your customers won't think it's a bad thing if you say, listen, I need to find resources, so I need to make money to fund my business. Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you think AR, VR, and on-demand videos are going to be educational enablers in the near future?
Yeah, it's great. And again, I think we can go back to some of the examples, back nearly 20 years. So take them one at a time. So like the video thing, I think that's already working, I suppose. But if you just go onto YouTube, like I do it all the time, if something's broken in the house, I look it up and I find the video and I fix it. But I'm not really learning anything, I'm just following the video, right? So there's still a need for the instructional design to say, okay, if you've watched a video, what has to happen next for you to really probably embed that? So video works for, I think, for a lot of practical based stuff. But if you just have a video of somebody telling you, like the classic ones for me are the Stanford lectures. Like sitting and watching a Stanford lecture for 45 minutes, I guarantee if somebody asks you a week later, what was it about, you won't remember most of it. So video has a place, but I would say it's for practical, watching something now, do it yourself, and then there should be some ask you to explain what you've learned or write it down or something. AR I think is really interesting because that's going to be situational. So, and obviously the headsets are probably not quite there yet. I mean, the Google Glass, I remember trying it, and actually it was in this building. And this will get there, but it'll probably come first for things like, medical, surgery stuff or whatever, or in production facilities. So you've got the thing on, you're looking at something and saying, I'm not sure about this, and you can just, hello Google or whatever, but you can get access to whether it's medical information, product information, and you probably have to have learned it somewhere in the past, so you won't learn how to commit to do a surgery through it, but you will use it to support you to do this. So a lot of it's about on-the-job support, and then I think virtual reality, and we've invested in a virtual reality business. Again, it's probably been around and hyped for most of the 20 years, but certainly 10 years it's gone through. I remember Second Life was going to revolutionize learning, but actually the business we've invested in was using Second Life for language learning, particularly in oil and gas industry. So you're going to work in Kazakhstan on an oil platform. You need to know about the oil platform, but you also need to speak enough Russian and Kazakh to work with your co-workers and get a beer in the hotel. So it was all done in Second Life, and it was pretty clunky, but they were learning how to use that virtual world for learning. So now after we invested in our business the last 2 years, they've built it all again in Unity. So they've now built a real proper 3D environment, but all the lessons they had about how technology can impact on learning that they learned over probably nearly 10 years, 37 or 8, can now be applied in that virtual world. So again, it comes back to the technology is probably there, but the real innovation for me is in somebody in the team being the person who understands the education piece, who's trying to learn something using that technology, and can we use the existing models of education but apply a layer of technology to that. So
I suppose it's around having a platform that actually deliver these things.
Yeah, and that's where these guys had to build. So certainly they had to. The Unity platform was available as the tool again, but to my point earlier, they had to build the world. So they've had to build the hotel, they've had to build the oil rigs, they've had to build all those as worlds, because there's nothing off the shelf that would do that for them. And I think the same if you were to take, whether it was Oculus Rift or any kind of heads-up display, the technology might be there just to display something, but you've got to build where's the content going to come from, how's the person going to search, and is that based on GPS? So if I'm in a certain part of the facility and I look up, I'm going to get the plans for all those things have to be created. But that is just software, if you know what I mean. The hardware is there now. It's all about good ideas with software. Yeah.
Just on that element you mentioned, the pedagogical part that you feel is really important. Is there someone or an organisation you think is doing a really good job, has a good methodology around learning and around delivery that you could recommend?
So I'd start with LearnOvate. So LearnOvate is the technology centre. Literally, it's hosted by Trinity College, but it's industry led. So they have people on the team across the spectrum. So instructional designers, pedagogues, and technology people. So go and talk to LearnOvate. Then if you're looking for instructional designers, there's again based on the industry, because 30 plus years of doing this stuff across these different technology evolutions, there's a lot of people who've been through all those waves of change. So again, if you want to, Amy's in front of you there, if you give Amy your details, we can connect you with, there's companies that provide instructional designers now, and I think the thing to ask would be to find the right instructional designer for your project. So it's a wonderfully broad title, but it's like a developer, right?
Okay.
So if you need a really good JavaScript developer, there's no point going and hiring somebody who's a database guy. Right? You know, so the same with instructional design. If you want to work, if your product is for, 7 to 9-year-old children, there's no point really having the instructional designer. It can work sometimes, but by and large, find the right instructional designer for you. Question?
Just when it comes to growing the business organically, like yourself, what advice would you give, I suppose, in a position where a company, I suppose, the demand is there, if you were to take on another 3 or 4 salespeople, obviously to increase that, or what point do you say we're going to grow organically?
Yeah.
So for yourself, you took on 150,000, what kind of decision, how did you make that decision?
Yeah, I think this is where there's more funding available today, right, at different levels. I didn't actually point out that as being this sort of why things might be easier. It's cheaper to build stuff, but it is easier to get that seed funding if you've got a good idea. And again, I'd say if you've got that first few customers, I'd say it's more a question of what do you use the funding for, right? So let's say you've got your small team, you get your initial seed funding. What do you spend it on? I think that's going to come down to what do you have in the team already. So you've got to look at yourselves and say, okay, let's be brutally honest with each other. I think I'm a great engineer and you think you're a great salesperson, but really, our product sucks. So how good is my engineering? Or do we need a product person? Right. So what we're actually missing is I can develop stuff, but I need a product designer or something. Right. So you look at the team and say, where's the gaps again that we need to fill? The really tricky one is you've hired a salesperson and it's worked, and let's say you've generated, more obviously than their cost, and you're seeing this is working. If I hire 5 more of these, is it going to go by 5 times? And that hardly ever happens. So you got to be prepared for, some of those not to work out. But I would say it's the hardest decision to make is like, are we going to just, by hiring more people, because that means we're going to be able to grow, we're going to sell more. So yeah, that's the tough one.
It's tricky because when it comes to the side of development, obviously to remain unique.
Yeah.
Or else do you put it into just sales force, like to obviously generate more revenue to obviously do that part. And I suppose that's what the question I'm asking is that your advice is like, do you continue the way you are organically?
I think it depends on whether, if you feel like, so again, I would say, maybe I talk about the evangelistic sales kind of process. If you feel that, let's say you're the CEO, you've got people now that you're comfortable with building whatever your product is, maybe you're involved, but you're able to get out there and you feel you're able to get those first few customers, that's fine, to do that. But at a certain point in time, you go, now I should really hire somebody who's 100% focused on sales. And to do that, I need to find the right person. And that's the kind of thing we help companies with, and say, look, you're the CEO, like you need to keep your eye on all these different balls. So it's great that you've got those first few, in fact, probably nobody else would have got those first few customers. Like very, very few salespeople, brought in, like I have a great idea, I'm gonna hire a salesperson and he's gonna sell it. That doesn't usually work. So you've got to get out there, do that first phase of selling, and then find the right person to work with you. And maybe you're still going to go out and do a lot of the work, but that person is, is pounding the phones, is pounding LinkedIn, is doing whatever the process is that works for your business, and then you're going with them to the meetings or what it is. But the key thing for me is who's doing the follow-up, because you go and you do all those meetings and then you come back to your office and there'll be people laughing here because there'll be things you're supposed to do after the meeting and you don't get to it, and then the sales guy's going, well, I thought you were going to respond with. So that's why you need somebody who is just gets back to the office and all they care about is the follow-up, and they're saying, you need to give me that stuff we promised them, because I need to get it back to them. So for me, that's why it comes back to that relentless focus on execution. It's like have a group of people who all know what they're doing, and they're not all doing the same thing, but everybody knows, listen, my job is to get the business in. You're going to help me as the CEO, but I'm waking up in the morning thinking about that.
If I might just jump in at the question there, how do you motivate? Like there's a fairly easy relationship between how you motivate a salesperson and the reward, right? It's like you sell more and you get paid more. How do you motivate the back office people, the people who are going to do the follow-up? Because
the first thing I'd say is that it's never quite as simple as that with salespeople either. But you're right. Overall, I think the environment has to be right. So everybody has to feel like, again, that they're having fun as much as they can. That they understand why we're all doing what we're doing. So my mic just gone there. they understand like why I'm doing what I do and why you're doing what you do, but we also understand where we're going together as a business. So that sounds kind of simple, but that's the alignment thing. And that's why, you know, with all our businesses, we say, look, at least twice a year, you need to get everybody together, and starting from the CEO, you need to remind people why we're here, what we're doing, where we're going. And then everybody goes back and says, okay, I get it. So now when I'm having to handle this irate customer, and I'm thinking the only reason they're you know, it's probably not on the phone anymore, they're on this live chat session, because the guys in development forgot to take out that line of code, which means the system's crashing. You know, but I'm okay, because I'm gonna, you know, and when this person comes back and say, listen, you guys are great, you solved my problem, I'm not gonna go and beat up the guy who forgot to take the line of code out. I'm gonna go, okay, that's why we're all in this together. So for me, it does come down to everybody, you know, feeling like we're part of something, and you know, you're never going to keep everybody happy either. Like, and certainly just, you know, throwing treats around the place isn't going to work for anybody. But that everybody understands, okay, I get why we're doing this. And look, you won't keep everybody,
Yeah.
but I think you'll hopefully keep the right people, because the people who buy into what you're doing will be the ones who will stay.
More questions?
Yep.
Kev.
I was sort of wondering, from what I see in education, I wonder if that is juxtaposition where, like you're saying, the technology can be done, you can develop these quicker and cheaper than previously before, so the technology is quite agile there, but certainly in the likes of formal education, they can be very slow to move with these things, at a practitioner level then as well, or even if the practitioners are eager and you get something going, then they have to get right off from above, and then people above them are saying, well, we're semesterized, we're not going to do anything until the summer to move into this new technology.
Yeah.
Do you hit a lot of roadblocks like that? How do you deal?
Yeah, I think that applies in all formal education as well, by the way. So it's not just in sort of third level. You get exactly the same problem in schools. You get the teacher who's really innovative, but they're usually buying with their own credit card. Like, you'll find that in a lot of schools, the whiteboard was supplied, but there's limited budget for software, and somebody else decided to spend that budget on, you know, Microsoft Word or something. So the teacher goes, well, I love technology. I'm gonna go and access free stuff, or I'm gonna pull something together. So it definitely applies across the board. I think and we've seen companies that we're involved in starting to do this, is try and go direct to the consumer. So again, that's like if it's parents or if it's a student, try and or in one business was like the lecturer. So it's like the lecturer, not the lecturer because you're giving them content, but because you're letting them connect their students. So it was just like a social platform. So they give it to the lecturer for free, but then their business model might be that eventually we're going to build up paying customers because they like the connectivity they're getting with other students. So maybe go direct in some way. I would favor the go direct to somebody who's going to pay mode rather than just give it away for free. But parents paying for something that the kids then bring into the classroom and tell the teachers they're using could lead, you know, to the teacher going, okay, well, there's a classroom edition I can get if I get my, you know, not supervisor, but like if I can get the school to pay for the classroom edition, then we're going to get more value. So you could add value for the classroom edition. Again, I don't know if like a student only got a certain edition, but the lecturer, once they paid, could have marking schemes or, you know, that kind of thing. That there's, because I do think that if you're just basing it on selling, like universities in particular, it's like an institutional sale, so it's like a corporate sale, but it's even slower than a corporate sale. So you need a professional sales force probably to be going and trying to do that. So yeah, I feel your pain. Yeah.
You've worked a lot with software simulations, and you built the training for Microsoft Office products. And where do you see the next trend in the software simulations industry? What's next?
Oh, geez, I don't know, because that was a long time ago now. And it's funny because Lynda.com, obviously, any of you who are involved in tech startups, I'm sure you got Lynda on your first slide, whatever it was, $1.2 billion from LinkedIn. But genuinely, I remember Lynda, we used to be at trade shows in the UK in the early 2000s, and they would be there selling videos of how to use Word. And we were like, that's rubbish because it's only a video, to my point earlier. You can interact with every step of our software. And now what does Lynda have? It has videos, right? And you sit and watch a video of somebody showing you use it. So I think that's maybe gone backwards, but To be honest, I haven't looked at the software training space. As we would now say content is not really the sort of things we'd be looking at. So I think they tried to get, like obviously Microsoft tried to get better in terms of, you know, embedding stuff into the software. I still don't think that really works either. The dreaded paperclip was a disaster, but it's not really much better, you know. How many times are you in any, and not just Microsoft to be honest, any software product, you go to help and weird stuff starts coming to. That is not what I was looking for. Not the weird stuff you might get in Google, but you know, it's still like, you go, I just typed in a word and you've given me a ridiculous set of search results. But that's one of the reasons why we're looking at search. So Learnovate will be looking at, let's get better at search still. Like it's still not great, you know. And so I think maybe context sensitive and then better search, so that you can use a help file, because the help file can bring up a video, or the help file can bring up a sequence that shows you what. Most people today can pick up the software pretty quickly, but they just need to they don't know where to find that feature.
Yeah.
A lot of the time, particularly in Microsoft products, it's there somewhere, so you need to be told where to find it. So if you can get there quicker, so I'd say that is probably context sensitive and search, rather than the actual delivery of the materials. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because sounds like Linda still hasn't, added the simulations to their.
Oh look, don't get me started on Linda. I mean, fair play to them. In fairness, Linda literally and her husband, so they did a lot better than the husband and wife that I was stuck with. I genuinely, I still can't work that one out. We actually pay for licenses for Linda, so there's nothing wrong with it. It's fine, it's good. But for me, there's not much innovation there. But who cares if LinkedIn give you that much money, you know? So.
I have to admire the audacity of an investor sitting in Google saying that we really need to get better at search.
I'd say it to them, right? Like, Google search is great for what Google search does.
Yeah.
But again, my example, anything that's like, that's why a lot of the work that the guys do and learn about is in things like semantic search, natural language processing. Like, unless you tell Google what it is, and we all know how to use Google now, right? So we get better at, you know, putting in more than one word,
yeah.
But we put in a couple of words, and you know, it's great. But when you're in other environments, that search doesn't work the same way. It's not as good. But you got to keep Google on their toes as well, right?
Patricia.
I know you said you guys aren't looking at content, but you saw the newest unicorn is abcmouse.com. Those guys are making content, purely content for kids aged 2 to 7. I think they raised $150 million out of $1 billion valuation to go into schools. But they've their technology is subscription services for content. I don't know, interested in your opinion?
Yeah, I was actually going to talk about Patricia earlier, so I'm glad I now know she's here. So Patricia's a great example of a startup spinning out of Learnovate. So and got way more technology than it sounds abc.com have. So you should be looking for a valuation of $1 billion. Do you know what's funny with the edtech space? I think the Linda thing fits into this as well. Like, so anybody who's been involved in it, obviously as long as we have, but is still amazed by the VCs, the US VCs in particular. They have been heralding this as being this thing. They've just discovered it in the last 4 years, and that's why they're pumping all this money into it. Like, it's been around for 30 years, and somebody who knows what they're looking at looks at something that's not that different to what was done 15 years ago. But these new investors don't know that, and they're going, oh, well, it sounds, I've been told it's going to revolutionize learning, and it's, you know, cheaper than using a teacher. And go, geez, no kidding, right? So I think there's a lot of that still around. So we say to companies, look, that's why I said when we spoke about it, I said, if you could go to America now and find those investors before they spend all their money, then go and raise as much money as you possibly can. We're not going to invest in you at those levels of valuations. And we've had a couple of instances of that where companies where we said, look, that's too rich for us. But geez, fair play to you if you can get it. And I think sometimes people won't come to us with their e-learning or edtech idea because they know we'll probably find some holes in it. But if they can find somebody who can find those holes, then fine, you know.
Is that a problem with being specialised in industry?
I don't think it's a problem, because I mean, we would feel like, I think we want to watch a lot of those valuations, right? Like, those unicorns, you know, they're not worth that yet, other than they've raised money at that valuation. Right? That doesn't mean that that business in 5 years' time is going to have generated that level of returns, except to the people who've sold at that valuation, right? So I think it'll be really interesting to see, let's look and see what Linda is doing in 2 or 3 years' time for LinkedIn. Let's look and see what ABC Mouse, whatever it is, .com is doing. Does it even make it? Like a lot of those won't actually make it, and therefore it'll be, well, it was never worth that.
Yeah.
It's just people invested at that level. So I would say no. As an investor, it's better to know, because we won't lose the money that others will lose by investing in some of the wrong things. Now, will we miss something? You could do, but at those levels, such a high risk attached to that. I think you couldn't do very many of those level of investments.
No, you got blown away very quickly.
Yeah.
You mentioned that
Is
there was
that the time? That's
no,
the
it's not.
beer
But
already.
I am wrapping up. You mentioned when I asked you about sort of like the split in your day, that there wasn't anything particular that you really didn't like, but I'm sure there are days when things just go terribly wrong and shit hits the fan. What do you do as Jonny to recover from those days?
I try and make sure everybody else is able to recover. Look, again, I think like literally we have the famous quote from Rocky Balboa, right? Is on the wall, because it's like, it literally isn't as hard how hard you hit. It's can you get up off the floor after you've been hit that hard? So you just keep saying, listen, guys, these things happen, right? Things go wrong. Literally, shit happens. It is how you react, and it's also how the customer sees you react. So I always point to going out to customers where there's no way, they say we are not renewing or whatever it is this has just been a disaster for us. You go, no, I hear you, let's talk about it. And you win that customer back. 6 months later, you get a call from somebody saying, I believe you guys are great at this. I go, yeah, where did you get my name? And they tell you, well, I got it from Jimmy, from the client that you thought you were going to lose, or so you provide that fantastic service that helps the client to manage themselves through that difficult point. Usually the client will say, that was incredible. When we deal with companies like this, we usually end up having to clean up the mess ourselves. And I always say that, look, Google stuff breaks, Microsoft stuff breaks, Apple stuff breaks, like technology breaks. So kind of expect it to break and be ready for it and say, okay, we know what to do now. Right? Here's what we do when the stuff breaks. And everybody knows again what they're supposed to do, what their role is in addressing that.
But that leads to the next question, which is, what do you do when people break? Well, when but I mean, like, not being facetious, but I mean, when it's not a technology problem that lets you down. You're talking about the fact that you trust the people in your team, and you say to everyone, listen, we're going to bounce back up. What happens when it's the wrong people, or it's the wrong mission, or the values aren't aligned?
So I'll have to go back probably and try and think back, to previous business to think around. And I honestly, genuinely don't think it happened a huge amount. But usually the hardest, sort of people decisions or tasks you have to go through are the ones which are, for whatever reason, letting somebody go or dealing with a particularly difficult, personnel issue or whatever. Those are usually the hardest ones. And that's again one of the reasons why we would have, in the previous business, built up a culture of being all about people and the little things that actually matter. And if you look after those, then the big things aren't so hard. And within Versari, we have, like, even within a small team, as we call it, people and performance. We don't call it HR. We call it people and performance, which is all about helping you hire people, helping you then induct those people, helping those people understand like what they need to learn in their job, and literally bring them through that process, which in a startup doesn't usually happen. So you just look, here we are, there's a computer, there's Mary over there, there's Jimmy, you guys will work it out. And we say, no, that doesn't always work. So let's put in place some process that we know does work, even at early stage. And hopefully if you do all those things, the difficult ones are less likely to occur. Or maybe if you find out within the 6 months or the first year, this isn't a fit for you or for us, that you kind of can address it, at that point rather than later on. But I genuinely think, look at there's wood around here, touch wood. I think if you get your hiring processes right and your induction processes right, it's much less likely that you'll have that bad a situation. You always have to work with people to improve their performance, right? That's not like nobody walks in and is 100% at everything. So you have to build that in. So you have to have some kind of as we call them, impact reviews, because it's not about the salary, it's about your impact and how do we help you to perform better. But if all those things happen on a routine basis, hopefully you won't get too many surprises.
I think we'll leave it there.
Yeah,
at the moment.
looking forward to.
I'd like
to the beers.
Absolutely. I'd like to thank Jonny for his time and his insight this evening. You've been great to give us all of your efforts here. You are going to stay around for
I
a
am
while.
definitely.
So
I'll switch the mic off now, so I'm not out there broadcasting to the building.
That's a good idea. Kill the mic.
But
Sorry,
yeah,
just
obviously, myself, Alan's here as well, and there's other colleagues here as well. So like we can chat to anybody.
Super. So
as long as required.
If you're sitting on a question, we'll go outside and we have it there. So can I get a round of applause, please?